Peter picked a pack of pickled peppers. Peter, Peter, pumpkin eater, kissed a girl and didn't see her. You are a Peter pumpkin eater. Peter, Peter, pumpkin eater. Peter, Peter, pumpkin eater. Peter, Peter, pumpkin eater. Wow. Zers. Boom, chicka, boom, 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 boom. Okay, welcome to Infinity. Boom, 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 boom. Okay. Welcome back, true believers. Insert corny intro here. In today's episode, we will discover whitelists. Ooh. So I like to run with whitelists in my organization. Essentially, a whitelist is a security policy that says these are the apps that I'm allowing to run. If the app is not on this list, then it don't run. It's a nice little security thing. You definitely have to do some research to figure out which ones you need to run, which ones you don't run. But 90% of the time I have found that if everything installs the way it should within the program directories, then essentially between the combination of a whitelist and the combination of making users a normal daily user and not an admin means I can write to a location that I cannot run from, and I can run from a location that I cannot write to, which by default means stuff that's downloading from websites and things will not be able to run by default. So something that downloads to my user profile, to my downloads folder, to my documents folder, I can download. I can write there all I want. But when you try to run it, boom, the whitelist will stop it, and vice versa. The admins will install to program files. They'll install their installers to program files, but since the user can't write there, that means you're allowing them to run anything that's in that program files. This gets away from those that have like Chrome, where if it senses that it can't install to the program files, will install to the user app data as the installer. This would stop that from happening because the Chrome extension or the Chrome exe would not be able to run, because it wouldn't be able to run from there. So to get started, we'll open our group policy editor, our GPO management. We will go down into our structure. Now, placement here is kind of key. You don't necessarily want to place it way up high, and therefore your servers get affected, because again, you shouldn't be running into your servers or running stuff off of them without really good knowledge of what's going on. So what I do is I'll go down into my company area, and I will create a GPO in this domain and link it here. I always like to create GPOs for specific items. The biggest reason is when you're trying to figure out what something just happened, it's nice to have a GPO for every couple of things instead of one GPO that encompasses everything. Then you're like, well, what settings are actually linked to this from that to the other? So by having multiple GPOs, you'll know immediately what you can link and can't link. So it just makes it a good best practice. So Disney application whitelist. And then inside we'll go to edit. This brings up our GPO specific stuff. Over time we might go over these things. GPOs have a ton of settings in here that you can just play with and do. Personalization, you can do not display the lock screen, prevent enabling of the lock screen camera, prevent enabling of lock screen slideshows, network, look at all that stuff in network. You can enable, disable thing, user accounts, So there's a lot of things in here that you can do. Server, Windows components. Look at all that stuff in Windows components. Holy crap, that is a lot of stuff. And down in the user area, preferences. You can do a bunch of things with preferences. You don't want to show you or hide objects. You can do that here. Set it and forget it. You never have to turn it on again. So there is a lot of stuff. The key here is that the computer side applies to the computer layer. The user side applies to a user. So when you're in your Active Directory users and computers, any user will be hit with the user configuration. All your computers will get hit with the computer configuration. It's a way of kind of filtering and sorting things out. So for example, if you have a policy set at the company level at the HR area, and you set it with the computer, then anything in any computer in there will get it. If you put the user in it, then it's the user side. That was not a good example. So for one of the examples is I could log on to a computer from HR or from IT, but if the policy is only set in one of those domains, then it only affects me when I'm logging into that. It'll affect me no matter where I go because the user side follows me wherever I log in. So I could set up my own personal shares and stuff. So when I log on to an HR computer, I get my shares, but the computer side follows the computer. And in this case, and some things are only available on one or the other. In this case, the application whitelist is only available on the computer. So we go to computer, we go to Windows settings, we go to security settings, and then down in the application control policies. There is two different ones. Software restriction policies is the old Windows 7 kind of stuff. The application control policies is what's kind of the current stuff with Windows 10. Another name for it is Applocker. It's more robust with what it can do. So we go down into Applocker. And by default, none of this is really set. You can see rule 000. So we'll go in and we'll go into properties. And that brings up our little thing here. So enforcement. Specify whether Applocker rules are enforced for each rule collection. So executable rules. We're going to enforce the rules. This means any executable .coms, .exes, all that stuff is now being enforced by the rules we set later. Windows installer rules. Again, audit. You can either audit stuff or you can just enforce the rule. And then scripts. And then packaged app rules. And under advanced, the DLL is kind of a tricky thing. We're not going to enable DLLs because some things play funny with this, but and plus it affects the performance, so we're not going to play with that one. So boom, right there, Applocker is now enabled. So what we want to do from here is we want to take each one of these little folders and go through and make it. Now there is the first thing you want to do is the automatically generate rules. So in this case, we're going to generate the rules. You'll select user security groups that the rules apply to, which is pretty much everybody. Folders that contain the files to be analyzed, C program files. So it's going to go through C program files and pull in all the EXEs by default. Name of the profile, boom, you hit next. Create publisher rules for the files that are digitally signed. So there's a couple of ways of doing this when setting this up. You can use the publisher rules, which if the publisher digitally signed their stuff, which is great because then you can set things at a higher level to affect lower things rather than having to constantly hash things out. So you can create publisher rules, which is what we're going to do. We're going to file hash rules are created. And then we're going to reduce the number of rules, so it's going to sort of to kind of apply things. We want publisher rules as much as possible. Next, and we'll get into file hash later. So it's gone through now when it does this, it's looking at the local C drive, so to make these and pull them in. But what it's saying is, we found 2 publisher rules, we found 31 files. Hey, here we go. Review files that were analyzed. Here is everything that is there. You can either check or uncheck. So basically, it's going to allow all of these to run by default. And create. Default rules are currently not in the rule list for the rule collection. When creating rules, it is recommended that you also create the default rules. You want to create the default rules now? Yes, I do. And boom, there we go. So now, by default, anything in the Windows System 32 folder and the program file folders, as well as these other ones, will now run. So this covers 95% of what you need. I enforce the installer rules, but I'm not going to create any installer rules because I want to be able to force it so that I actually have to put information in to stop installers from happening. So I'm not going to create one where it says, oh, this and that and the other. And same with scripts. I don't want these things to run without my knowledge. So by not doing anything here, it forces the system to prompt me for a username and password in order to install anything or to run scripts or any of these other packaging app rules. Now, this covers 90%, 95% of everything you're going to do. But let's say you've got something that's in your user app area. So you've got something in your app folder that you need done. So we're going to create a rule. Go next. We're going to allow everybody. And here we go. We got publisher, path, and file hash. So I'll show publisher real quick. You go to publisher and you pick it up and it's got digitally assigned. This is where you can have like the slider stuff. So this is where like if Adobe installs something weird, you come in here, you select Adobe, and it'll give you the publisher and the product name. So you could do Adobe Reader, and pretty much anything that's signed by Adobe, that is Adobe and Reader, it will allow it to run. You don't have to keep hashing it when you do an update or anything like that. So that's really handy with the files that are updated by the little guys, because if it's a little guy file, you pretty much either have to do path or file hash. With path, you got to be careful with path, because if you point to a path that an end user can put data into, can write to, and they realize that they can also put something in there that can run, then you just basically got past your Applocker. So really, it should be publisher, file hash, and then path as a last resort. So file hash, what that does is you point it to the file that you want to do it, and it will hash that file. Now the thing is it hashes that file to the point that any new version of it cannot be run. So every time you have an update to it, every time you make a change to it, it changes the hash, and therefore it will block it the next time it tries to run. So you can do hash. That's on the small stuff that you don't really change too much. Otherwise, you just come back in here and update it. And that, in a nutshell, is whitelisting. So now, once the computers get this new policy and they reboot into it, they can, now you're stopped. This is how I run on both my home systems and my work systems. I run everywhere where I'm not an admin and I have a whitelist going. This stops 99.9% of everything that's coming in. It's not foolproof, obviously. Nothing ever is, except for to disconnect yourself from the internet and just go hide in a log cabin. But this stops most everything from going in because you're not an admin, so you can't write to these locations. And when you do install something, you know you're installing it, so you have to put in the username and password of the admin to install it. and now it's installed to the program files, and then you can run it as a normal admin. So that is whitelisting in a nutshell. Comment, like, subscribe, all that other fun stuff that the YouTubers say. Peace. Bye.